Hi. Welcome to the development track. I am introducing Josh Ward, an alumnus from the Colorado School of Mines, which is a thing. His kids call him El Jefe. You'll call him Josh. Welcome.
Thank you. Are we good? Can everybody hear me? No? If I talk louder? We're good? Yes, my name is Josh Ward. I'm with Nexus. I'm here today to talk about the evolution of hosting and what's next in cloud architecture. You may have noticed that they put a sales guy up first in the dev track, and that's just because it's after lunch and they felt like you wouldn't be paying attention. So we're good. If you happen to Google me and you were like, I'm really looking forward to this talk, who is Josh Ward and what is he doing in Nashville? You may have seen my concert that I did a few weeks ago. No, it's not me. It is Josh Ward. He is a country singer and he steals all my online, like if you Google me, you see him. Because you're obviously not Googling him, you're Googling me. So I'm going to talk about evolution today. One of the things I like about speaking is that I get to do deep dives into Google image search and find fun images and throw them in slide decks. So I'm going to start with that. We're going to talk about fun evolution images. So the first one I thought we could all relate to, because we're all probably really cramped behind old computers all day. Star Wars, because you have to have a Star Wars slide at a tech conference, that's a thing. I do have 4 kids, so one of the things that especially my daughter now tells me that I'm battling is my dad bod. So it's evolution there. It's almost Halloween, and our marketing guy, Gasper, he's around today. He really loves Halloween, so I had to throw this in there for him. That was sort of his slide. We're in Nashville. How many people own a pair of Cowboy Boots? Yeah, so me and one other person. That's fantastic. 2 other people. That's good. So I was like, evolution of the cowboy boot would be a really good thing to talk about since we're in Nashville. The beautiful thing about cowboy boots is that they haven't changed for like a couple hundred years probably, and they don't need to. They're perfect just the way they are. Some things don't need to be improved upon. Like country music probably doesn't need to evolve past a certain point either. Probably not a lot of country fans in here. But again, Nashville, it's a thing. Moving back towards let's say technology, evolution of the cell phone. For those of you that don't remember, there was like an age thing earlier where some of you were maybe younger than others. The one on the far end, farthest away from me, that's a pager. You can't talk into that. It's not a thing. Text-only cell phone, yeah. But you only text numbers. You only text, yeah. The Zach Morris phone on the far left, one of my favorite all-time phones. My favorite phone to ever carry, though, is that one, the Motorola Razr. Best phone ever. I would trade my iPhone for that right now, if anybody had one. That was a great phone. So technology improves, it evolves. It's not like Cowboy Boots. It gets better. We do more stuff with it. We find more uses, more purposes for it. Nexus is a Detroit company. We're based in Michigan, just north of Detroit, actually. So cars are a big thing. They're a big thing for our CEO. They're sort of a big thing for our state. So I have a car slide. These are two very different very different cars. So the top is the evolution of the BMW. I think the 5 Series from like 1972 to 2010, right? So you're looking at 40 years, just shy of 40 years, 30, 40 years worth of evolution. And anybody who has ever seen a BMW probably knows that it's changed a lot. The interior has changed, the technology, the nav system, the braking systems, everything in a BMW just seems to get better and better, right? That's one of the things that BMW does really well is sort of this continuous improvement. On the bottom, we have a completely different car. It's a European car. It's the Lada 2105 to be specific. Literally did not change for 30 years, from 1980 to 2010. Did not change, but guess what? It was super popular because it was really reliable, because you could find parts for it anywhere, because it just worked. It was easy. That's a thing, and it's not a bad thing, right? A Lada is a really attractive car, especially for somebody who has teenagers that drive, like, yeah, something cheap and that can be easily fixed and never breaks down. I'm 100% behind that. Now that we've gone through about 10 slides, you may have forgotten who I am and why I'm here, and that's okay. So I'll remind you. I am Josh Ward. I'm with Nexus. We do web hosting. Since about 2012, we have been the official Expression Engine hosting company, or the official hosting partner of the Expression Engine platform. We're really excited about that. We like coming to this event every year. We like participating in the community. We're really excited about all the open source things to come. As a company, we are very much built on open source, and I'll get into that here in a moment. But so I'm here today just to share a bit about how hosting has evolved for us, how it's changed over the years, and very specifically, what are the problems that we have with hosting today, and what do we see as some fixes for those problems, some improvements as we move forward. I will also have a couple of public service announcements. This is still a thing for some people. Quick story. I was at a conference about a year ago, had a conversation with a guy that owned a development agency. He was telling me about that they host their clients' websites. And one client in particular, you would know them. I don't feel like he didn't mention their name, but apparently it's somebody that we would buy like plumbing supplies and hardware and tools. They're like orange colored logo. But they host that site. They host the international versions of that site, which I didn't know existed. And they have an office in Italy. And he was telling me how the site kept going down because it was summertime, and there's no air conditioning in the building that they're in Italy. And so people were bringing in like window units and plugging them in the wall, and it overloaded the circuits and brought the power to the entire building down. And so the site wasn't accessible for like days on end as they tried to beef up the infrastructure there. So that still happens. I mean, it was last year, it's 2017. Stuff like this still happens. Please don't do that for your clients. Like, don't do this to yourselves. Don't do this to your clients. Don't do this to your local power grid. It's not a good thing. Don't host stuff in closets. Host them in data centers. And that's a different discussion. So we'll start at the beginning when it comes to hosting and evolution. Back in the day, we had some things like AngelFire, GeoCities. If you wanted a website up, or you wanted some sort of web presence, and you didn't have a really strong internet connection, you didn't have a server, you didn't know how to do computer science-y type stuff to actually host a web server and whatnot. If you didn't want to learn how to do HTML or whatever, you would go to one of these sites, you'd sign up for an account, and you would post a website. That was a thing. And this was the genesis of shared hosting. This was like shared hosting as it existed in like 95-ish. And that's the thing. And guess what? Nexus still sells shared hosting. And it's basically the same thing. Shared hosting, it's multi-tenant, meaning it's you and a bunch of strangers sharing a piece of hardware, a bare metal server, a pizza box, as it were. Sometimes you have good neighbors, sometimes you have bad neighbors. So you have to deal with that. You can't really scale shared hosting. Like your host, we can add RAM to the box. That scales it to a certain extent vertically. Maybe we can do that. But there's no really scaling options, which is a big thing in 2018. If you want to upgrade, you have to go to another platform. You have to go to a bigger shared box. You have to go to a dedicated server. There's a migration tax with that. If you want to move, you have to pick it up and move it over. And if anybody who's ever like moved houses knows that it never sort of works that way. Like there's stuff breaks, you have to fix it, you have to replace it. Same thing happens with web hosting. But the beauty is that even for a hosting company, this is easy. Like shared hosting is fairly easy. It's solved science. It's a thing that we've been doing since '95. So it's come a long way. It's stable. It works. It's easy. But what about development? Development in shared hosting is really hard because I have to make, as a hosting company, I have to make a very generic environment for shared hosting so that it fits a whole bunch of different kinds of websites and architecture. So you as a developer can't really get tricky with like, well, I want to use maybe this specific version of PHP, or I want to tweak this server setting to be this or to be that, because I may not be willing to make that change in a shared hosting environment. So at times you may want to tweak the environment to help out on the development side, and we don't want you to do that because it makes shared hosting hard, and we don't want shared hosting to be hard. So development isn't super friendly from a shared hosting standpoint. And then there's a nice little diagram about everything that runs on the shared hosting server. So a shared hosting server does everything. It plays a lot of roles. And that's where the open source piece comes in. Like everything we do on the server side it's all open source. It's all open source software. So again, big fan of open source. So if we kind of move up the ladder, we go from shared hosting, we go to dedicated hosting. You'll notice that the picture on the right doesn't change. It's the same. It's the same server. A shared hosting server and a dedicated hosting server are the same things. You can also sort of think of that diagram as like a VPS or a single like cloud instance that's wholly contained in itself, and it's doing all the jobs. The nice thing about dedicated hosting, it's single tenant. It's just you. You have no neighbors. Maybe you have multiple clients that you're hosting their websites on a dedicated server, but again, you as the agency or the developer have no neighbors, which is really nice. Scaling options. Again, we can add hardware. You can scale vertically, but we can only add hardware to a certain extent. So vertical scaling sort of caps out at some point. And if you want to scale horizontally, meaning more servers, you could maybe add a database server. You could pull that database server over and you could make it its own thing, and then you have two servers, which adds some complexity, and we'll get into that in a second. Again, from an upgrading standpoint, you sort of have the same issues. You're always moving to a new server. You have a migration tax. It's mostly easy. It's not as easy as shared, but it's mostly easy. It works. More importantly, again, stuff we've been doing for a really long time. What about development? Still kind of hard, right? Again, at this point, you can make lots of tweaks to the server environment. You could develop on this server and go to production on this server, which is not a best practice. Even as a salesperson, I know that you're not supposed to be doing that. So I'm not encouraging you to do that, but you could. But then what about if you want to develop locally? How do you copy that environment to your local machine and make sure that they're always identical and get all your other work done? It's a really hard thing. So dedicated hosting doesn't solve all the problems. Clusters, enterprise server environments. We do a lot of these. We really like doing clusters because they're complicated, they're fun, they're challenging. The great thing about clusters is that now we have, in this case, we have 4 servers, each sort of doing its own job, right? Much more specialized. We can isolate problems much easier. You can do vertical scaling. I could upgrade any of those servers, but I could also do horizontal scaling. I could add multiple web application servers to handle all my front-end traffic. I could, excuse me, I could add multiple database servers, either for redundancy or again, for speed, performance, that sort of thing. If I want to upgrade, I don't have to move to a new environment. I can just add servers. That's the thing, which is nice. You could scale vertically, and I could add resources to those servers. I could add new servers. I could add an admin server. The bummer here is that nothing's instant, right? If you called me up and said, hey, Josh, give me another web application server, then I would tell you yes, first of all, and then I would have to go to my data center operations team and get them to rack a server and plug that in and install a base set of software, and then I'd have to talk to my sysops team to sort of add more software to that. And then we'd have to make sure that that new server matches all your old servers in terms of versions and configs and whatnot. So it's not instant. There's scaling there, but it's not instant scaling, which is probably what we all want. And then again, development. We just made the environment way more complicated, which means your job as a developer to replicate that locally or to develop in this environment gets more complicated. We've added complexity there. So it doesn't solve all our problems, but it does run bigger sites. And again, it works. It absolutely works. It's super reliable. Like I said, we've been doing environments like these for a while. And then cloud came along, right? So as we're evolving along, we've got all these bare metal solutions. We sort of had this VPS thing. And then cloud came along. And I was like, oh, cloud's awesome. And raise your hand if you know what cloud is. You're all lying. Nobody knows what cloud is. It's not a thing. You're not lying, but I bet your answer and your answer are completely different. But cloud came along and we were like, oh, this is great. Let's build enterprise environments in the cloud. Let's do that. That should be a thing that we should do. And so we did. Turns out, a lot of times it looks exactly like the bare metal architecture does. And it does because again, it works, right? We've sort of proven that this enterprise architecture is a thing and it works and it's stable and we know how to deal with it. SysOps is comfortable with it. But we've got all this new technology, right? Amazon's doing awesome stuff. Nexus is doing awesome stuff. And yet we've just copied the architecture over, right? We're not innovating on the architecture side. And I think that's a problem because we end up with mostly the same issues, right? Development is still maybe not super friendly. Very little is truly instant. We can sort of pretend that it's instant in a cloudy way, but maybe not truly instant. And there's not really anything new that you get out of copying this architecture over to a general cloud environment. So that's how hosting has evolved, and we have some problems. Migrations are a problem. Development is not necessarily a problem, but it's not friendly. It probably hasn't made your life a whole lot easier as a developer. Scaling is still not completely solved, and there's other stuff. So little innovation, migrations suck. What data do we use to trigger scaling events? So if we had instant scaling, how do I know when I should instantly scale, like when that should happen? Most cloud platforms are not application specific. They're not built for Expression Engine or Drupal or WordPress or any other application out there. There are some people solving these problems, but they're doing it very rigidly. They're forcing you into a flow, to a process that may not be the way you've been working or your team has been working for years. Local dev environments are always different from production environments. Like that's a thing that you just sort of accept. But it would be nice if that wasn't true. Solutions that don't necessarily help you run your business. Hosting becomes a bottleneck, right? We are a hindrance to going live instead of enabling taking a site live. All this, and we still need performance, security, and uptime, right? So it's got to be stable, it's got to work, it's got to be easy. My site needs to be fast, and nobody needs to hack it ever. Those are all still things along with all the other issues. So how do we solve these, right? That's sort of what I want to talk about next. I'm going to pause quickly for another public service announcement. If you have water coming out of your electrical plugs, I don't know, run probably is the best response there. But should I call a plumber or an electrician? I get bonus points if I quote my CEO in presentations, so I'm going to do that here. Chris Wells, the CEO of Nexus, likes to say, when I need something fixed in my house, I don't call a plumtrician. That's not a thing. You're either a plumber and you're fixing my pipes, or you're an electrician and you're fixing the circuitry in my house. Rarely do those two things completely overlap. And yet, we have this really cool thing called DevOps that I've been really excited about before. I think others have been really excited about before. And it's not a thing in that being a developer is hard work. Being a good developer is hard work, takes time to learn and be really good at what you do. Being good at SysOps is hard work. It takes a long time to be good at what you do. And a lot of times those skill sets overlap. There's definitely some area where the Venn diagram sort of joins together and like, oh, look, there's DevOps. But on a day in, day out basis, that's not, we don't ever see that as like a consistent thing to set you up for success. Right? It's a really hard gray area to play in and play in consistently and stay up to date on both sides of the house, as it were. So I've got bonus points, and we'll move on. So your butts, hold on to them. We're going to get into some cool stuff. At least I think it's cool. Quick warning, I am a salesperson. I am going to show you screenshots of Nexus products. Please know that while I'm doing that, we are not the only ones innovating in this space. I will try and give lip service to others as we go through this, because there are other people doing similar things. But I'm going to talk about me for a second, because that's what I do. First off, environments built specifically for applications. DigitalOcean is great, but when I fire something up at DigitalOcean, it's not built for anything, right? It's sort of built for everything. What we do, or what we want to do and encourage others to do, is if you're spinning up an Expression Engine site, spin it up specifically for EE, not for WordPress or not for Magento. Right? The issues that I have on the Magento side or from an e-commerce perspective may be completely different from those on the Expression Engine side or from a content standpoint. Your settings, your default settings on the server should be different. It should not match 100% completely across the board. That's a thing. It should always be a thing. It should be customized. Your clients will like that. Number 2, performance, right? We still need performance. All these other problems we have to solve, but we still need to solve performance. Sometimes performance is really tough. Varnish is a thing that is really sort of tough. It's tough to do. And if you didn't think about adding tools like Varnish and other caching features at the beginning of your site architecture, sometimes it becomes really hard because of the add-ons or the plugins or whatever else you're running later on to just plug in Varnish or other performance tools. It's not always just a simple flipping of a switch. So what we've done, what we again encourage others to do, is decouple that, right? Why can't you do caching away from the server environment? The way we do that is we put HA proxy out in front of the server as a load balancer. So it sort of lives, again, separate from the server, separate from the environment. It gets the request from the visitor, and it says, can I cache this? Is this content that I can use micro-caching in Nginx and cache that content and then provide it faster to the next visitor? Is it static content? And if I can, then Nginx provides it through HA proxy, and we're good. And guess what? The server environment has never been touched because it's already cached. So your server's just sitting there, and it doesn't even know that somebody visited it, which is fantastic. If it's dynamic content, more dynamic content, then hey, we've got a third party, or not a third party, but a separate Varnish installation, Varnish cluster sitting off over to the side where we can cache dynamic content. And we can still harness 80% of the power of Varnish, but we don't ever have to install it on the server. We don't have to configure your site specifically to work with Varnish. And we still get all of this benefit. And then worst case scenario, we don't have anything cached. It's a brand new request for some page that hasn't been visited in the last 2 hours. Well, then we just go ahead and we pass the request on to the server, and Apache and PHP and MariaDB and whatever else goes through its thing, builds the content, and spits it out to the visitor, right? But what we've done is we've installed 2 levels of caching before that request ever gets to the server, which means you need less hardware resources to serve the same amount of traffic. It means that the content's served faster to your end users, to your visitors coming to your site. Everybody sort of wins there. That's a good thing. So think about decoupling some of these services from the server environment. It doesn't have to be all contained in one little box, right? We have new tools. We should use those. We should exercise them. Let's talk about scaling for a second. Captain Planet is greater than the Nashville Wild. Is it the Wild? Is that the hockey team here? The Nashville hockey team. That's what this picture is. What it's supposed to be is like resources, natural resources, get where I'm going? Natural resources, more important when you're scaling than visitors, right? So there's some platforms out there that say, well, we're going to watch Google Analytics, and when it hits a certain user threshold, we're going to scale your solution, right? Well, if I've decoupled some performance tools, or if I'm doing some caching, maybe I don't care about exactly how many users are on my site. Maybe I care when like CPU load hits 10% or 20%, or some of my PHP max client levels hit 90%. Well, now I want more more RAM, or I want those to be increased. It's much better from our perspective to monitor server resources than monitor specific visitors, which is tough to explain to an end user. A site owner doesn't necessarily understand that, right? They're in Google Analytics every day, every week, pretty consistently. They're probably not looking at their, their server resource usage on a daily basis, right? And so while that's more important, we still have to make those two things talk together, right? We need the Nashville hockey fans to go to the Captain Planet on Ice concert and still be excited. Remote development site creation. So what if you're not developing locally? Right? That's a pretty common thing. You're not developing locally. You want to spin something up. You want it to be publicly available. But you have two issues. The first issue is I need to make sure that the environment that that dev site is in matches production. So that's one issue that needs to be solved. The second one is how do I get a bunch of example data into that dev site that matches my production data, but scrubs all the personally identifiable information, all the PII stuff. So I don't accidentally email everybody in my database, all the users on my site, on my dev environment. Those two things are issues that you need to solve, or that would be great if they were solved. Guess what? We solved them. So you can not only, right, you're creating a dev site, you're creating it on an instance that's not production, you're copying all of your server configs over, and you're copying, or you can copy, all of your database information, all your content files, media files and whatnot. You can copy those over, and you can scrub the information. We'll anonymize everything for you, right? So that, again, you can test with actual data, with an exact replica of your production site, and not worry about spamming, again, your entire database accidentally. But you say, that's great for remote development. I like to develop locally. So what if you had a Vagrant file that I could give you that would replicate exactly what we had for your remote development environment? You just download that Vagrant file, you fire that up on your laptop environment, and then you're off to the races. Right? That would be great. That would be great. We don't have that yet. But we have a proof of concept that I could grab a screenshot from and show you today. But that's the thing. That's the thing that other people besides Nexus are thinking about, and that we're going to continue to think about, and problems that we need to be able to solve with all this other cool, cloudy new technology. Versioning and Git flow the Nexus way, right? There are ways to do this. Other hosting companies have ways, and they tell you how to do them. We don't have ways to do them, right? What we want to do is enable you to use your current processes, to use Git or whatever it is that you're using for versioning, make it easy to plug into our platform, and then you keep doing things the way that you've been doing them, right? We want to enable your processes, not force you to create new ones, because they probably work. Forcing secure access, so security is an issue. Nobody wants to talk about this. We're going to make sure that your password resets every 3 months. Every 90 days, that's going to be a thing. You should probably be doing it anyways. Anybody who has access to your server environment should have their own login. We're going to force that. We're also going to not email you your passwords anymore, because that's a bad thing. Emailing passwords is bad. Use a password manager. Stop emailing passwords. Don't do that. Serverless or service-oriented architecture. So this part I'm really excited about. Again, not something we have yet. It is something that Amazon has. Amazon has serverless architecture. Google has this. They're the ones that kind of coined the serverless thing. We prefer the service-oriented architecture, because there's always a server there. I mean, let's be real. It's always there. But serverless is really cool because it does a couple of things. The first is it completely decouples each one of your services from any single box. So I don't know if you can see up there, but the top left circle is PHP. But that's just PHP. That's not your web app server. It's not running Apache and your application and PHP. It's literally just an instance of PHP. So what happens if I'm running a really PHP-heavy website and I just need PHP? Well, in current architecture, you have to replicate that web application server over and over and over again, which is hard. In this architecture, you just get more PHP. You just scale PHP over and over again. You just copy and paste that, right? Much, much easier. What happens if you need more Redis instances for caching? Again, you just copy them. What happens if you need more database instances? Just copy them, right? It literally decouples, takes your LAMP stack, right? Linux, Apache, MySQL, PHP, and takes the LAMP stack and spreads it out and puts each one of those services on its own thing. That's really exciting. I think if we were to project 24 months down the road in the hosting space, this is going to be the really neat, cool, new stuff that you're going to want to use and you're going to want to push your clients to use, because it's super scalable. It can be really small and at the same time be really big, and there's no migration tax. You don't have to move to a new environment because of the way you're replicating those services. So this architecture is the future of hosting. This is where things are going as far as we're concerned. This is where we're moving to, and this is what you should be on the lookout for. Hosting companies that can provide this to you. Because if you have that client where you built a really tiny site for them, and they just blew up and got way popular, and now they're getting a million visitors a day or something, how do you do that without going through multiple iterations of hosting environments and maybe switching hosting companies and development issues and whatnot, right? Resetting everything every time they get a bump in traffic. This is the way you do that. So, beyond hosting, there's some things that we can solve, right? We can be innovative in our architecture. We can go serverless. That's the thing that hosting should be doing. We should be trying to get rid of migrations. Migrations suck. They're not good. If you're with the same hosting company, we shouldn't have to migrate you from platform to platform. That should be something we could solve. Intelligent scaling events based on not visitors, but server resources, things that actually matter because of all the other cool stuff we're doing. Things built for your applications specifically. No more wasting time with mismatched environments. Also, no more wasting time trying to make your environments match, right? Don't waste your time on that work. Hosting that helps you run your business better. Launch sites at your pace without hosting being a stumbling block. Yes, we should all want that. That's a good thing. Performance, security, and uptime. We want all those things too. We want all the things. We also want support, right? We talked about the whole DevOps thing. We don't give root access because that's our job, right? The SysOps piece is our job. We should be managing this hosting environment so you can do what you do best, right? Support, all this other stuff is great, but one of the reasons that shared hosting still works is because we offer support. Hosting still offers support. You can just call us up and ask for help, us being the hosting industry. Call us up, ask for help. Support is still a thing. And in all this, support is still a key element to the evolution of hosting. That can't go away. That's my talk. There's the speaker feedback link, eeconf.com/speaker-feedback, if you wouldn't mind going and being super honest with your feedback. Also, just so you don't find the other Josh Ward, I am at Josh D. Ward everywhere. Feel free to email me at Nexus for Nexus-y type stuff. We're here all week, at least till Friday. That's it. Any questions? Yes, ma'am.
Do you operate like auditing services? Have a lot of old stuff that we're trying to migrate out?
Auditing on like the code side or like on the environment side?
The environment side, like how do you consolidate what needs to be done?
Yeah. The question was, do we offer any sort of auditing services to help properly size the environment, or the type of environment that the site builds? Yes. So I am a salesperson. My background, I started off as an IT manager. I was a Linux admin for a long time. From a hosting perspective, I have sat in the support chair, in the marketing chair, in the sales chair, and since I've sort of sat in all the chairs at some point in my career. Most, if not all, of our sales team is similar to that, so that we're not the ones with our hands in service anymore, but we do understand how it all works, and we work really closely with our other teams to make sure that your sites sort of find their way to where they should be. So yes. Yes, sir.
You mentioned the Vagrant File, which is are you thinking about Docker?
We are. I'm not allowed to say a lot about Docker at the moment, but yes. So Docker is a thing that we're getting super intimate with on the dev and tech side right now. Yeah, I couldn't wrangle a slide that talked about it, but the answer is yes.
After a architecture, how do you handle mutual dependencies, something like that,
You talking about in the serverless architecture piece? Yeah, so you would you would want consistency throughout each one of those PHP instances, right? So you would go in and say I'm on 5.6, I want to move to 7.1 or something, right? And you would change them all sort of at the same time. Right? Ideally, you do that in a dev environment, and then you know it works, and then you make the change in production type of thing. But yeah, it's sort of point and clicky, right? Drop down box type of thing. Other questions? Great, you've been fantastic. Thank you so much.